From archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. JATAKA number 145. Radha JATAKA. How many more? This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery, about craving after the wife of one's mundane life. The incidents of the introductory story will be told in the Indriya JATAKA. The master spoke thus to the brother: it is impossible to keep a guard over a woman. No guard can keep a woman in the right path. You yourself found in former days that all your safeguards were unavailing. And how can you now expect to have more success? And so saying, he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the Bodhisattva was born a parrot. A certain Brahmin in the Kasi country was as a father to him and to his younger brother, treating them like his own children. Pathapada was the Bodhisattva's name, and Radha his brother's. Now the Brahmin had a bold bad wife. And as he was leaving home on business, he said to the two brothers, "If your mother, my wife, is minded to be naughty, stop her." "We will, Papa," said the Bodhisattva, "if we can. But if we can't, we will hold our peace." Having thus entrusted his wife to the parrot's charge, the Brahmin set out on his business. Every day from then on his wife sexually misconducted herself. There was no end to the stream of her lovers in and out of the house. Moved by the sight, Radha said to the Bodhisattva, "Brother, the parting injunction of our father was to stop any misconduct on his wife's part, and now she does nothing but misconduct herself. Let us stop her." "Brother," said the Bodhisattva, "your words are the words of wrongdoing. You might carry a woman about in your arms and yet she would not be safe. So do not work on the impossible." And so saying he uttered this stanza. How many more shall midnight bring? Your plan is idle. Nothing but wifely love could curb her lust. And wifely love is lacking quite. And for the reasons thus given, the Bodhisattva did not allow his brother to speak to the Brahmin's wife, who continued to move about to her heart's content during her husband's absence. On his return, the Brahmin asked Pathapada about his wife's conduct, and the Bodhisattva faithfully explained all that had taken place. "Why, father," he said, "should you have anything more to do with so wicked a woman?" And he added these words, "My father, now that I have reported my mother's wickedness, we can dwell here no longer." So saying, he bowed at the Brahmin's feet and flew away with Radha to the forest. His lesson ended, the master taught the four truths, at the close of which the brother who craved after the wife of his mundane life was established in the fruition of the first path. This husband and wife, said the master, were the Brahmin and his wife of those days. Ananda was Radha, and I myself Pathapada. Source: adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. JATAKA number 146. Khuddhaka JATAKA. Our throats are tired. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery, about a number of aged brethren. While they were still of the world, they were rich and wealthy officials of Sravasti city, all friends of one another. And tradition tells us that while they were engaged in good works they heard the master preach. At once they cried, "We are old. What to us are house and home? Let us join the brotherhood, and following the Buddha's lovely teaching make an end of sorrow." So they shared all their belongings amongst their children and families, and, leaving their tearful family, they came to ask the master to receive them into the brotherhood. But when admitted, they did not live the life of brethren. And because of their age they failed to master the truth. As in their life as householders, so now too when they were brethren they lived together, building themselves a cluster of neighboring huts on the edge of the monastery. Even when they went in quest of alms, they generally made for their wives and children's houses and ate there. In particular, all these old men were maintained by the generosity of the wife of one of their number, to whose house each brought what he had received and there ate it, with sauces and curries which she provided. An illness having carried her often, the aged brethren went their way back to the monastery, and falling on one another's necks walked about bewailing the death of their benefactress, the giver of sauces. The noise of their crying brought the brethren to the spot to know what ailed them. And the aged men told how their kind benefactress was dead, and that they wept because they had lost her and should never see her like again. Shocked at such wrong act, the brethren talked together in the hall of truth about the cause of the old men's sorrow, and they told the master too, on his entering the hall and asking what they were discussing. "Ah, brethren," said he, "in times past, also, this same woman's death made them go about weeping and wailing. In those days she was a crow and was drowned in the sea, and these were toiling hard to empty all the water out of the sea in order to get her out, when the wise of those days saved them." And so saying he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the Bodhisattva was a sea fairy. Now a crow with his mate came down in quest of food to the seashore where, just before, certain persons had been offering to the Nagas a sacrifice of milk and rice and fish, and meat and strong drink and the like. Up came the crow and with his mate ate freely of the elements of the sacrifice, and drank a great deal of the spirits. So they both got very drunk. Then they wanted to frolic themselves in the sea, and were trying to swim on the surf, when a wave swept the hen crow out to sea and a fish came and gobbled her up. "Oh, my poor wife is dead," cried the crow, bursting into tears and cryings. Then a crowd of crows were drawn by his wailing to the spot to learn what ailed him. And when he told them how his wife had been carried out to sea, they all began with one voice to cry. Suddenly the thought struck them that they were stronger than the sea and that all they had to do was to empty it out and rescue their comrade. So they set to work with their bills to empty the sea out by mouthfuls, taking themselves to dry land to rest so soon as their throats were stinging with the salt water. And so they toiled away till their mouths and jaws were dry and inflamed and their eyes bloodshot, and they were ready to drop for weariness. Then in despair they turned to one another and said that it was in vain they labored to empty the sea. For no sooner had they got rid of the water in one place than more flowed in, and there was all their work to do over again. They would never succeed in bailing the water out of the sea. And, so saying, they uttered this stanza: "Our throats are tired, our mouths are in pain. The sea refills always." Then all the crows fell to praising the beauty of her beak and eyes, her complexion, figure, and sweet voice, saying that it was her excellencies that had provoked the sea to steal her from them. But as they talked this nonsense, the sea fairy made a bogy appear from the sea and so put them all to flight. In this wise they were saved. His lesson ended, the master identified the birth by saying, the aged brother's wife was the hen crow of those days, and her husband the male crow. The other aged brethren were the rest of the crows, and I the sea fairy. Source: adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. JATAKA number 147. Pafarita JATAKA. I count it not as pain. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery, about a brother who was passion-struck. Being questioned by the master, he admitted his weakness, explaining that he longed for the wife of his mundane life, for, "Oh sir," said he, "she is so sweet a woman that I cannot live without her." "Brother," said the master, "she is harmful to you. She it was that in former days was the means by which you were impaled on a stake. And it was for bewailing her at your death that you were reborn in hell. Why then do you now long after her?" And so saying, he told the following story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the Bodhisattva was born a spirit of the air. Now in Benares there was held the night festival of Khuddhaka. The city was decorated like a city of the gods, and the whole people kept holiday. And a poor man had only a couple of coarse cloths which he had washed and pressed till they were in 100, no, 1,000 creases. But his wife said, "My husband, I want a safflower-colored cloth to wear outside and one to wear underneath, as I go about at the festival hanging round your neck. How are poor people like us to get safflowers?" Said he. "Put on your nice clean attire and come along." "If I can't have them dyed with safflower, I don't want to go at all," said his wife. "Get some other woman to go to the festival with you. Now why torment me like this? How are we to get safflowers?" "Where there's a will, there's a way," retorted the woman. "Are there no safflowers in the king's conservatories?" "Wife," said he, "the king's conservatories are like a pool haunted by an ogre. There's no getting in there, with such a strong guard on the watch. Give over this fancy, and be content with what you've got." "But when it's night time and dark," said she, "what's to stop a man's going where he pleases?" As she persisted in her requests, his love for her at last made him give way and promise she should have her wish. At the hazard of his own life, he swiftly moved out of the city by night and got into the conservatories by breaking down the fence. The noise he made in breaking the fence woke up the guard, who turned out to catch the thief. They soon caught him and with blows and curses put him in chains. In the morning he was brought before the king, who promptly ordered him to be impaled alive. Off he was hauled, with his hands tied behind his back, and led out of the city to execution to the sound of the execution drum, and was impaled alive. Intense were his agonies. And, to add to them, the crows settled on his head and pecked out his eyes with their dagger-like beaks. Yet, regardless of his pain, and thinking only of his wife, the man murmured to himself, "Alas, I shall miss going to the festival with you dressed in safflower-colored cloths, with your arms twined round my neck." So saying, he uttered this stanza: "I count it not as pain that, here impaled, by crows I'm torn. My heartfelt pain is this, that my dear wife will not keep holiday, dressed in clothing bright color of reddish dye." And as he was babbling thus about his wife, he died and was reborn in hell. His lesson ended, the master identified the birth by saying, "This husband and wife were the husband and wife of those days also, and I was the spirit of the air who made their story known."